We'll call this meeting to order. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor Mixon.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Billingsley.
Present.
Councilor Curry.
Here.
Councilor Howe.
Here.
Councilor Hubbard.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll call for a motion to approve the agenda, leaving it flexible to move G up when Hermio comes for the audit.
Make a motion to approve the agenda with the flexibility of moving G up and Emil arise.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I call for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And we do have a request this evening for Jack Fuhrer.
Long time ago, when I used to attend these meetings, one of the things that made it worthwhile, or at least understandable, was the availability of the packet that you all get. That used to be posted here, and you'd be able to get a hard copy, and I think it was also available online. And I think that it would be helpful for everyone attending the meetings and other citizens that look at stuff online.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
We have purchased a 72 inches? 75-inch television that will be put up as soon as the brackets come in, and all of the packets will be there. You'll be able to follow along with what we have sitting in the audience.
Okay, that's a definite
Yes.
improvement.
Yes,
Will also be available online
No.
prior to the meeting?
not online because of the amount of usage. That's what we just talked about. Sometimes they're so big, but you're always welcome to come in and get a packet from Keith
Okay,
at any time.
well, hard copies also.
Well, that's what you could come in and get, yes.
Okay, but I'm saying if you, formally, they were available here at the meeting, there was one copy available.
Oh, you mean in the shelf? They could
Yeah.
be- you could just discuss that with Keith afterwards, yeah.
Okay.
But there's gonna be a monitor that has a big monitor. It's big, so
Okay.
that everybody can follow along and packets will be on there.
Definitely.
We've been working on it, yeah.
Because if you look at these things, you have the
They don't make
motions and
sense.
resolutions that you can't understand
Yeah.
anything that's going on.
Yes.
You know, so it'd be a definite improvement.
Thank you. Do we have any announcements or proclamations? No? Going to governor body reports. Then we will go to the manager's report and turn the floor over to Morris Madrid.
Mayor and council, I have a few different things to report on. The first one is we do have a draft of our street improvement plan concept outline, and I'll just read you a few of the major points. First step is to identify a clear purpose and scope. We need to consider all roads, which roads. We need to find a roadway conditions evaluation methodology. How are we going to evaluate the conditions of the roads? And this would be for both paved roads, unpaved roads, and the drainage associated with it. In addition to that, we would have to find, once those evaluations are done, then we have to assess what the cost of improving those roads are. Surface or unsurfaced, based on their condition. From there, we have to develop cost estimates. And then, of course, the last thing is funding consideration. Those are just the concept points. I believe that the mayor is going to appoint a focus group to involve the community so that community members can give their viewpoints and input as to areas of concern and how to prioritize. That's a great thing. This is a long-term endeavor that I don't think that the village has done before. And, you know, in government, a lot of times we say you can do it fast or you can do it right. You want to do it right. So that's just the first step. This meeting should occur in the next couple of weeks, and I'll provide more updates as we go along. On the topic of roads, one thing that we're planning for winter already, trying out this year, and I have a high-tech demonstration for you. This is the use of snow gates. If you've never heard of snow gates, it's something that's used in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Aspen, areas that receive high snowfall during winter. Snow gates are meant to minimize berms in people's driveways and on cross streets. And here's a real simple visual of the way they work. The snow gate is an attachment that attaches to a blade on a grader or a snowplow. And it can attach on the end like this or like this. Now the first one, as you're plowing the street, you get to someone's driveway and the operator actually activates the snow gate to pull it in. So instead of the snow flowing out that way, for a few seconds, it pulls it in, doesn't create a berm on the driveway. The other type of snow gate is a gate that's flipped up while it's not in operation. And when you go to the driveway, drop it down, pulls the snow in, pull it up again when you pass the driveway. So that's one of the things that we're going to try this winter to minimize the burden of people getting out of their driveways. There's conditions that you can't use them in. If it only snows a couple of inches, they won't work. But when we get higher snowfalls, then they should work really well. So that's another new thing that we're going to do in our street department. The next thing that I want to talk about is our budget and our audit and where we stand in those processes. The first thing that I've done is I've enlisted the help of a retired DFA employee, Michael Steininger, who has done some work for the village before in the past. And his role, it's not a determined contract. This would be considered a contractual agreement. We absolutely cannot exceed $20,000. I don't think we'll get halfway there. The rate is $50 an hour. And the process for this is, from the beginning, we need to verify the accuracy and integrity of our cash balances. And that goes from the general fund to all our restricted or dedicated funds. The fire fund, law enforcement protection fund, our general obligation bonds, because the accuracy of the carryover is one consideration, and the other consideration is that we have not used or transferred those monies to any other funds. That's the first step. And I think we're in pretty good shape there. Those cash balances are both used to be the basis of our budget that we're working on to be submitted to DFA, because everything starts with your cash balances. The overall formula is you take your cash balances plus your projected revenue plus or minus any reserves that you're going to add or deduct, minus any expenditures. Your projected ending cash balance for the end of the fiscal year has to be 0 or better. They will not approve a negative cash balance budget. We are at least a week away from developing a draft of that budget. The cash balances are also the basis of our trial balances, which you'll hear a little bit about during the audit, because that is our most fluid, not necessarily our most valued asset, but it's our most fluid, and it's the one that we need to watch the most because our budget is based on cash collection and expenditure. So, in regard to that, I have an organizational phone call with our auditor, our consultants, and our DFA analyst from the Department of Finance and Administration to make sure that we're formulating a plan properly to get these things resolved all the way back to the system conversion that was done last fiscal year, to make sure that those balances were brought forward with integrity, and the year ended June 30th, 2022, which we'll be reviewing the audit this evening, was carried forward properly to 2023, and to make sure that we close out 2023 properly with all the right balances in place. So it's kind of a broad scope. We're trying to not duplicate work and make sure that we have the integrity in our numbers for both the budget and the audit. We don't want the audit to be late, and we want it to be clean the way it has to be. So the last thing that I have to report on that is that we were required to send the Department of Finance a kind of an action plan that addresses the findings that you're going to hear this evening. That's been done. Some of the processes have been changed already to incorporate tighter internal controls, better review of our cash receiving and processing of our expenditures. So those are already in place, and that documentation has been submitted to DFA. That's my report for the minute.
Question, how much time will council get before we're asked to vote on the final budget?
Well, Counselor, I'm going to say at least 3 days. By the time we post the special meeting, on that day, you'll have a draft document in your hands. They won't put it under your nose 5 minutes before, I promise you that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we're going into staff reports. I think the first one we'll hear from is Chris Chavez, the head of our water department.
So as everybody heard, we had a positive test for the E. coli. So we do a monthly sample, and it depends on what areas that the NMED has the samples. It's different areas every month. So when we did our monthly sample, we tested on Chino Terrace and Buena Vista, and we got a positive for E. coli. And then upon that, they had us resample. We tested on Tuesday. We resampled on Wednesday. We had to sample again, and they asked us to test on the well where the water was coming from before chlorination. And before chlorination, that's where we got our positive sample for E. coli. So once we got that sample, which was Wednesday, we didn't get our results back till Thursday. So then we had to test again, got those results back on Friday. So they had to test, so we tested, we got the results back saying it was E. coli. So we had, and then NMED got a hold of me and said that we were on a mandatory 7-day boil order, even if we tested. So that was 2 Fridays ago, and we had to test five. He wanted 5 samples on that time. So that was before chlorination again. We sent out those 5 samples that Friday, and all of them came back negative for E. coli. So we didn't get the results back till Saturday saying that they were negative. So he wanted more samples, 3 more samples Monday, 3 more samples Tuesday, and those all came back negative. And then we had to test again where we first came back positive for E. coli, and those came back all negative. but we were still under the boil advisory. We could not, we were under direction for NMED that we were still on the 7-day notice, well, boil advisory. So we could not, it wasn't up to us to lift the boil advisory unless NMED told us to lift that boil advisory. Since it went in effect probably Friday at 5 o'clock, so that's when it went in effect, and then we had to we sampled again, and they made sure back when on Chino and Buena Vista, we came back negative. So we were just waiting, we were just waiting for NMED. There's nothing that the village could do and say, well, we're gonna lift the boil ban. We had to. It was under direction for NMED when to give us the okay to lift the the boil order. So that was it wasn't the village's problem or fault for not lifting it. We were under direction of NMED and when we could do it. So all our samples after that have come back negative. And we talked, it was last Saturday, my foreman talked to one of the main guys from NMED, and he released us saying that we're okay. We asked for documentation that we could put out to the people, and he said we don't need to. There was nothing. He goes, just lift it. You have our authority to lift it. So we didn't have, and then from there on, it went on to social media.
Do they look at what caused it? We've had a lot of calls wanting to know what caused it. Will they look at that, or is there?
We don't know. There could have been there's the only thing, there's no cattle in the area. There's deer, elk, bears, but we don't know what the cause was. There's houses in that area, but it's kind of far away. Like saying it could be a septic or something, but I don't know if it was just something in that time when we tested. They never gave us, after that, for that period, for those 2-3 days, when we sampled, it was positive, and we sampled after that, and it came back negative. But they never, I looked into it, and that's the only thing is just fecal matter, but there's nothing in the area. Like I say, there's no houses that are close, right above it. They're in the distance. It's I don't know.
But it's safe.
The mystery. It's safe now, yeah.
Is there questions? Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, we'll turn the floor over to Fire Chief Bobbitt.
Thanks, sir.
Mayor, Councilman, Manager Madrid, Clerk Boggs. So far this year, Angel Fire Department has ran 297 calls. We're right on pace to what we have statistically been doing over the last 2 years. So no increase in as far as call volume. Slash has been a huge focus as of late. We have gotten rid of 4,000 cubic yards of old slash and chips, whether that be through donation or burning. That's just the old stuff that we've gotten rid of. The grapple truck is operational, and we have been picking up. We've picked up about 5,000 cubic yards of slash throughout the village. And then some bad news with slash. The old AIC, our curtain burner, is out of service right now. We have a mechanic working on it. And then the new AIC burner that we have is missing some keys. So we ordered some keys so we can get that operational. As soon as the keys come in, that should be a really quick turnaround. Then we'll be able to put that in operation. The large Mobart chipper that we have is also out of service. Mechanic also working on that. So we had a run of out of service, but we have a mechanic working on it to put everything right back in service. So hopefully it's a quick turnaround. Wildland, we did start defensible space assessment for assessments. We are working based off the CWPP as far as which neighborhoods to target first. We've got about 20 sites structural data already. So that was actually pretty quick as far as like implementation to how many houses that we've already completed. We are also working on a YCC grant. We have been successful in the past in obtaining this grant. We were unable to get it last year, so we're going to reapply for it this year. Our Type 5 engine is out of service due to a blown engine. We're working on getting that repaired. So a lot of our stuff is just, for lack of better terms, failing on us. But we are getting people in to repair it ASAP. The wildland team has been on 16 wildland deployments, ranging in days. The longest deployment's been 14. The shortest, I believe, was like a 3-day deployment, with over $200,000 generated in revenue. Fire and EMS, we have 4 employees this next semester getting higher credentials and licensure in EMS, which is super exciting. We have 1 in basic, 2 in intermediate, and 1 in paramedic. So we're kind of grooming them internally, which is hard to do with the smaller entities. So I think that's awesome that we were able to do that. I am working on submitting a $400,000 grant for a fire station. First step would be plan and design of the fire station. The radios, we have been upgraded and reprogrammed. There is a switch from analog to digital, and we had to reprogram all of our radios so we could get the digital channels. I do have a meeting scheduled with Julie and Rick Smith for the CWDG coming up. And then I've completed 2 carryover requests, kind of like Manager Madrid had mentioned about making sure everything's in line. 2 of my carryovers are completed, and I'm working on the 3rd one. And then we're working really well with Eagle Nest. We've incorporated them into our training, and so we're training them at the same time as we're training our people. We also attended a special event this last weekend in Taos. It was a Touch a Truck event, which the kids loved. We brought our giant aerial out there. It was the most popular truck in the area for sure, but the kids absolutely loved it. Everyone was very appreciative that we had attended that event. Inspections. One of the things that I wanted to do was be fair and equal across the board. And so before realizing, like, doing some businesses, I told Jared one of the things I wanted him to do is do our fire stations and get our fire stations up to code and up to the, so we are actively working on that.
You didn't pass?
It's not a pass fail. It's not a pass fail. We had a lot to work on, I'll put it that way. But if anyone is ever of interest to see those inspections, I'd make them open to the public at any time, because I do want to be fair across the board. And he was brutally honest with us as far as what we needed to work on. He has also been doing a lot of re-inspections to making sure that when these businesses get the fire inspection, that they're not just getting that piece of paper and moving on, but they're actually fixing the things that need to be fixed, so they are compliant with fire code. We have a meeting tomorrow actually with Image Trend, and it's for a demo for fire inspection software. That way we can start tracking like common trends and common issues. That way we can start educating the public on those things. So more on that will be coming after the demo tomorrow. I have been accepted into a class at the National Fire Academy at the end of October. That will be a 4-day or 5-day class in Emmitsburg, Maryland. I was successful in obtaining a new fire admin assistant, Haley Ball. So if you haven't met her, definitely welcome you to come by the fire station to introduce yourself. And then, can I give a brief committee report?
Sure.
The Fire Adaptive Committee, we've been working on planning a town hall. One of the things that we are definitely trying to do is educate. And so a town hall would help us with that education. And then we're working on rewriting the fuel modification ordinance, the 9-7-13, and or adopting some sort of code that's more geared towards the wildland and defensible space. And with that, I stand for any questions. Sir?
Okay, back under slash, last line, large chipper, which chipper is it?
It's the Mobark, the large grinder that we have.
And it's one we already have,
Yes.
okay? Under wildland, working on YCC grant, what's YCC?
YCC is the Youth Corps Commission, I believe. It's
Youth Conservation.
Conservation Corp, thank you. And so it's for younger people to give them jobs. And so they give us money to provide jobs for young people. And then we utilize them for thinning, slash, trash. Like we can utilize them for pretty much anything. But also get them training so they can pursue this as a career in the future.
So how much do you think that grant might be?
Usually we get anywhere between $150,000 to $200,000.
Okay, under fire EMS, completed 2 carryover requests.
Mhm.
What's a carryover request?
For budget, so at the end of the fiscal year, there's 2 budgets that I manage that can only be utilized for very particular items. And so any money that we don't spend, I have to basically get justification on why we didn't spend it. And so with those 2 budgets, we got awarded $130,000 some odd dollars for an ambulance, that the ambulance hasn't come in yet. So that's one of the justifications. The other one was the EMS Fund Act. There was some delay in manufacturing last year, and so we didn't get some of the stuff that we had ordered. So those are the 2 that I have submitted. The one I have not submitted is for the our fire funds, and that's a little bit more complicated, but we're working on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a few questions real quick.
Yes, sir.
On the fire station, the $400,000 grant, where are you applying to that? And the reason I ask is I was doing some reading over the weekend and Congress approved that $4 billion package down south. So I'm curious if we could apply, have you looked into applying for grants in that regard? Because it's a lot of money.
So there's the grant that this $400,000 grant is through the state fire. It's a grant that they put out every single year. Last year, I believe we put in for a $800,000 grant to replace our aerial. We did not get that grant.
Okay.
I was waiting to find out kind of what to put in for until they released their priorities. So they announced the grant, then they released the grant, and then about a week later, they're like, oh, here's our top priorities, by the way. And so their top priority this year is fire station maintenance, repair, and building.
Okay.
And so that's why, like, it's one of my top priorities. So it's theirs. That's why kind of aligned. As far as the other grants, Julie gave me access to grants.gov. So I'm always kind of roaming in through there to see what else we can qualify for or what else I can put in.
Have they released any details about what specifically that aid package can go to? You know,
Not
like,
that
are we able to apply for fire engines or, anything out of that?
To be 100% honest, I do not know.
Okay.
I'll definitely look into it.
Yeah, that's cool. No problem. The other, on Eagle Nest, I had somebody ask me this, and I know that we have signed a contract with Eagle Nest. The question that I was asked, and it's a valid one, and they weren't even particularly concerned if it was, but they wanted to know, does that contract cover all of our costs, right? Or at the end of the day, is the Village of Angel Fire going to be subsidizing service over there or not? They just wanted to, yes or no. And
So we are doing it at a loss.
okay, do you know the loss? Is it a little loss? Is it a lot of loss?
It depends on the day and who I have over there, to be 100% honest. Are they on overtime? Are they not on overtime? Are they PRN? Are they on straight pay? Are they full-time? Are they part-time? Any given day, it's about $250 to $350.
That's
A loss.
being subsidized, that's not part of the contract?
Yes.
Okay. And the last one I had was about the aerial, and you can correct me if this information is wrong, but I'd heard that Raton wanted to purchase our aerial. Is that true? And, because our aerial is not in service, or it's not working, correct?
So, I'm gonna backtrack just a little
Sure.
bit and then I'm gonna answer your question. So, new aerials or new ladder trucks are about $1.5 million.
Very expensive.
To get one that matches ours, as far as the amount of length that we have, we're looking at probably $1.6 million. Our aerial has passed a pump test, so the pump is perfectly fine. It's passed a service test, and we have a mechanic doing a full diagnosis within the next month to figure out what else needs to be fixed on it. So to answer your question, yes, Raton was interested in obtaining our aerial. I heard that kind of through the grapevine through someone else that was asking on their
Gotcha.
behalf.
So you were never actually approached by?
I was never
cheaper.
No, I was never
Okay.
approached by them. It was someone else who had approached me to see if I would even be interested.
Okay.
And I told them at this time, no.
Okay.
Because of the cost associated with getting a different aerial.
Sure.
And then I don't know what is wrong with that truck. So
Okay.
it could be a simple fix, it could be a complicated fix. So
Right.
that would then kind of gauge my direction on where to
Okay.
go.
And this is, I mean, I think we're all here. Did Henson, it was the lifting mechanism, right? Because he used to give us reports on the specific
So
items.
from what I could find, there was an issue with the internal pump or internal plumbing within the aerial. It kind of goes up and down. And so when you try to bring it down, it kind of bows a little bit.
Okay.
That's what I've been told and have kind of gathered. That's why I want someone to come tell me
Sure.
exactly.
Okay.
So there's,
Excellent.
yeah, we got a PO cut this week actually to do that.
Okay. Cool. Thank you very much.
Of course,
Thank you, sir.
of course, thank you.
Now we'll turn the floor over to Julie Coulthon, Grant Administrator.
Hey, Madam Mayor, Council, Manager Madrid, Clerk Boggs. So in the grants and project administration in the grants department, the village has received an additional $85,554 in capital appropriations. These funds can be combined with the previous appropriation of $75,000 to get tanks 2 and 4 cleaned and coated. I believe Supervisor Chris Chavez is trying to find a contractor who can do that for what we have available in funds. In Mexico Clean and Beautiful, the village has received $13,838 for several cleanup and beautification projects. New this year will be our Empowering Youth program for planting a bulb garden at the community center. And we hope to get them hired and started to get the bulbs planted by October, so that the bulbs come up in the spring. The North Vale Mammoth Mountain Road project is substantially complete. We are waiting on guardrails to come in to finish up that project. The Country Club St. Andrews, Way project has had the water lines tested 2 weeks ago now. The sewer lines are in and live. Utilities should be finished by the end of this month. Paving prep will should be beginning of this week, and project should be completed by the end of September, fingers crossed. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So where the guardrail's going in, is that where all the tape and the,
Yeah, we're just waiting for sandbar to get guardrails into them.
okay, I was wondering about that
Yeah.
just the other day.
So thank you for this.
Yes, you're welcome, sir.
Any questions? Thank you, ma'am. I think That's everyone for staff reports. Committee report just came with the staff report. I think that was the only committee that met. We have no old business. We'll go into new business. And I see that Scott came in. You're actually the last on the agenda, but before we approve the agenda, we made a motion to move you to the front so that you don't have to stick around all night. So,
all these people here for the audience.
there you go, yeah. And the out, you're on live. Do you have a motion for the presentation acceptance of final audit for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, please?
Make a motion for presentation acceptance of financial audit for the fiscal year ended in June 30th, 2022.
A second?
Second.
Then we turn the floor over to Mr. Scott Herman. Thank you for coming, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Village Manager, Village Clerk. Here to go over the results of the audit and two documents that I have here. I think that you guys probably have both documents. There's a hand stapled document. And I'll just go over the stapled document first. And first, actually, I did want to comment. I came in, I heard Manager Madrid speaking about Michael Steininger, and I work with Michael on a number of things, and I think he's top quality. So I think that's a good decision. So just a couple of things to point out on the stapled document. I think the first thing I'd like to just point out is the plan, scope, and timing of the audit. As everybody here knows, the audit was due December 15th. That deadline did not get met, so the timing of the audit did not get met. And there were some major errors in the trial balance, which we've already talked about. We'll get a little bit more into that, but there were major errors in the trial balance. And so the village had to hire an outside accounting firm to jump in and assist with various reconciliations and documents and a lot of adjustments to correct the books and records. And attached to the back is the adjustments. And there's a lot of adjustments. Now, most of those adjustments were done by the outside accountant, but I bring those to the attention of everybody here because we received the trial balance for which we were represented. It was ready to go, and it was clearly not. We, uploaded it into our systems, started doing some checks, and we realized that there was some major errors in it. So therefore, we spoke to the mayor and to Kimberly and said that we can't move forward, and you're going to have to go ahead and hire an outside firm to help out. So, anyways, I just wanted to point that out. And then on page number 3, I did talk about the uncorrected and corrected misstatements. I think when we got done with everything, we're not aware of any uncorrected misstatements in the financial statements. The village's contract accountants that helped out from mid-February 2023 to April 10th of 2023, they had 47 adjustments, and in our work, there were an additional 4 that we identified that were then incorporated into the financial statements. And then the last thing I wanted to report was on page 4 of this document. Just a couple of things there. The audit opinion on the financial statements themselves, after we got done with all the work, we were able to issue an unmodified or clean opinion. We would not have been able to do that without the assistance of the outside accountants that came in and did a lot of work. And then attached to this is a representation letter, which was done by Morris and Kimberly back on June 26th. So, there's a time period from when we received the final information on April 10th, and then we do the audit. We have back and forth. That takes some time. Ultimately, it got up to the state auditor's office on June 26th, and then the state auditor released it a bit later. And so here we are. at an open meeting to just go over the results of the audit as required in the state audit rule. The next thing I'd like to go ahead and talk about, any questions on this document? So just the next thing I'd like to talk about, the financial statements themselves are a number of pages long. You can see there's actually some size to it. The one thing about the village is it's for the size of an entity this size, its financial statements are probably more complex than you'd see for a town of this size. And that's because of a number of things. The utility system that you have here, which is maintained on a full accrual basis internally, and then all the governmental funds, which include special revenue funds, things like lodgers tax funds, and bond funds, capital projects funds, those kinds of funds. So it is a little bit more complex than you'd see for a village this size. And so the accounting staff really needs to have knowledge of running the cash basis financial statements that they carry internally for the governmental funds, but also the knowledge of accrual accounting because of the fact that you have those enterprise funds like the utility funds that are on full accrual. That means that capital assets are maintained and depreciated in those funds. That means that you have receivables booked, payables booked, and maintained. And so you really need an accountant with both skills, the cash basis skills and which the budgets are on then on a cash basis and full accrual basis. For purposes of the audit, the governmental funds, which are the funds up front generally, there's multiple funds, there's some major funds up front, non-major funds in back, the governmental funds, they are adjusted then to modified accrual, which means that we pick up payables and receivables, and then at the front, the governmental funds are then presented on a full accrual basis. And so you'll see all that in here. And I don't know that there's anything special I want to jump into, unless somebody's got any questions related to the statements specifically themselves. They're pretty straightforward. They're pretty comparable to previous years as far as presentation and disclosure. So if not, I will go ahead and jump to the back. Starting on page number 73.
Quick question.
Sure.
Do entities of our size ever just go on solely accrual, or is it?
Well, entities of your size don't necessarily have utilities, for example, that require the full accrual accounting. So, maybe it's, you just have more of things like utilities that have to be maintained on a full accrual basis. So a lot of smaller villages don't necessarily have utilities. They might have, part of a regional utility system or some other kind of utility system. So I think that makes you not unusual per se, but it just requires a little more skill than you would find in a smaller village your size. That was just more the point I was trying to bring out. So on page 73 is the schedule of finding and responses. And so we talk about, the auditor's report, which is an unmodified or clean opinion. However, we look at internal control or financial reporting. We do see that there were some material weaknesses, some significant deficiencies, and some non-compliance that's material to the financial statement. So what that means in the material weakness, that means that there was something so pervasive within the internal control structure that you may have had a material adjustment. And you did have material adjustments, and so we're going to get into that a little bit more. Significant deficiencies are something that's a lower level deficiency that's still important enough to bring to the attention of governance, and the non-compliance is simply what it is. Not compliant with certain rules, regulations, laws, those types of things. So the first one I want to talk about is the accounting system data migration as material weakness. So the village migrated from one system to another for their accounting system, which included all the utilities, receivable, payable modules and stuff related to that. And honestly, it was sort of a disaster. Just in all honesty, that conversion did not work well. But the village sort of limped along for those last 6 months of the year. And then when we got the information to look at, the trial balance, which was uploaded very late and almost at the audit deadline, it just had a lot of problems. And it was mapped incorrectly and things posted incorrectly. I think the problem goes back before January 1st, though. I think it goes back to the whole implementation process, because when you turn over from one system to another, you've got to have all those accounts mapped properly so that, they flow from one system to the other, because it's a mid-year conversion, right? And you have to really do a mid-year conversion because of payroll and W-2 and all that stuff. So usually this is the time you do the conversions on January 1st with the new system, even though you're at June 30 year end. And anyways, I guess the one positive thing I could say is, even though it was sort of a disaster, we were still able to get checks and everybody paid. If you go back to like the city of Albuquerque about 20 years ago, they did a conversion of this accounting system, and they had to write out all 5,500 checks to employees manually. So conversions, they need to be properly planned, and hopefully you guys don't do any more conversions, because just a few years earlier, you had converted from Tyler to the Cassell system and then back to Tyler. So there's been sort of multiple stresses on an organization having that many conversions in about 6 or 7 years.
Quick question. Do you remember when, you said like 6 or 7 years ago, I'm just trying to know when that first conversion happened?
Well, I don't know exactly. I know that you had been on Tyler, which is the name of the system. And then I think it's been 6 or 7 years ago, you maybe even less than that.
2015.
2015, okay, that's about the time frame I'm thinking of.
When that,
It was-
Ma'am, 2015, is that when it went in?
2016, I started January,
2016.
we were in code 7, and then we transferred into Cassell.
Okay. It was
And
around,
Cassell to
I
Info
knew it was somewhere
So
around
6,
there.
7 years.
Yeah,
Spot on.
so,
And then Molly put it back to,
but I can't emphasize the fact enough that when you do a conversion, you have to spend, months before that conversion happens, tracing everything out, making sure that it works properly. And I can't say whether that was done or not. I can just see the results of what happened. So I think that covers that first comment, I know that you're having an outside consultant, or at least that's what the corrective action plan was, a month and a half ago. That there would be an outside consultant to help come back into the system and look at the mapping and such. Because even though the contractor company made the adjustments to fix it, I can't say that it's really fixed internally.
he's in place.
So,
Yes, we did. We contracted.
and who did you contract with?
Cox?
Okay,
Michael Steininger.
Oh, it is Michael?
Yes,
He's
he's
doing
gonna
it?
help with both, not only the mapping between current Tyler to DFA for the
Yeah.
budget, but Cassell to Tyler for the mid-year conversion, because those ending balances, for example, in the fire funds, as of June 22nd, are the beginning balances for FY '23.
Mhm.
So we do need to make sure that they were properly mapped, even though it's not a detailed part of the audit, that's not what the audit is for. We need to verify that for our own purposes.
Then the next comment has to do with lodger's tax. And there's a couple of things here related to lodger's tax, a couple of bullet points. The first one is the council approval of lodger's tax expenditures. So when we look at the process that's been done historically, and then some of what was done in 22 is, some of it was approved by a resolution, the expenditures, and some of it was, via the budgeting process. And, when we look at the ordinance itself, so state law says, you don't have to get down to this level of doing a resolution every time, right? But if you go back to the ordinance, it actually uses the word administer instead of budget. And so I think that's the key word, is administering the funds. And so a resolution really spells out how you're going to spend that money, as opposed to a budget, which is broad categories. So that's why we think the ordinance that was done, 27 years ago, on lodger's tax is more prescriptive than state statute. And you should follow your ordinance, it's more prescriptive. And so you may want to go back and, challenge yourself. 27 years ago, there's probably some things that actually changed in statute that may require that ordinance to actually be updated. Because I know there's been some changes over the years with lodger's tax in the statute itself. So I think that's an opportunity to say, do we want to continue to do it the way, the ordinance is written to administer the funds, get really involved? Or do we want to be less involved and just look at it, budgeting by major category? So that's the comment there on that. The third comment has to do with lodger's tax revenue, and there's in the statute a requirement for lodger's tax audit. Anytime that you're over $250,000 a year of revenue, that there's supposed to be some random audit reports that's performed by the village clerk or designee of the governing body to verify that, the occupancy payments have been made, the taxes and all that kind of stuff. If you look, actually, the village has exceeded the $250,000 every year since 2015. So it's been a number of years that should have had an audit done. The last 2 years, I think, is when it's really grown as far as the amount of lodger's tax collected. My recollection is that Kimberly did call DFA and ask the question, do we have to go back and audit all 7 years, or draw a line in the sand, start at a starting point? I think it was 2 years back, but I could be 2 years correct. And typically we see these not done by the village clerk, no offense, but they're usually done by an outside sort of accounting firm does these because they specialize in doing these sort of things. So that would be my recommendation. Unless you really want to get in there and do some auditing.
No comment.
No comment.
The last point is accumulation of lodger's tax funds. And they've accumulated over the last few years. You're supposed to spend it all within 2 years. I understand that there was COVID. We just simply point to that where different entities weren't able to spend the money like they had in the past. We just go back to the state statute that says you have to spend in 2 years. I understand that, there's been sort of this theme of let's just kind of let that go. And now that we're back out of COVID, let's start spending the money. So I think that's where the village is at. There's quite a bit of money that you can actually spend every year now.
Yeah, the governor stopped us from spending it for a couple of years, but Tammy's spending it. She's working on it.
So I think that covers that comment. Now we get to the comments that aren't quite as strong. And we consider it material noncompliance on the lodger's tax, especially since you haven't had the audit done all those years that you should have had done. As really material
Since
noncompliance.
2015, it says.
Yes, but I know that you guys will get that done this coming year. You'll get those things rolling. And then on to comment number 3. This is on accounting record keeping. I think this had made some improvement from the record keeping itself, not talking about the conversion or anything like that, but some of the record keeping had improved with the bank reconciliation process. There's still some differences. I think, when you look at cash is the most important thing, I think, to the organization. You really have to get your bank reconciliation spot on, and there's no really excuse not to be spot on with bank reconciliations. I know Michael Stenninger would tell you that. Then the next comment has to do with payroll, just some documentation issue there, lack of supporting documentation. Not going to really get into that. It's pretty insignificant. This next one, we classified as material noncompliance. That has to do with reviews of contracts by village council. And you have a document. You had it during the course of the audit because Kimberly showed it to us and said this is the current, process. It was in the binder back to an administrative policy back from 2004. that said all contracts are to be brought forward to village council for formal consideration. Well, not all contracts have been brought forward, so we see that as a violation of the policy, even though there is some, difference of opinion here that maybe the assertion is that the prior village manager had rescinded it, but we couldn't get evidence that it had been rescinded. And so, we think that policy should have been followed. We do recognize that's a 20-year-old policy. And so, I think that policy can be looked at and sort of rehashed. I think though that.
It's already been taken care of,
Okay, so
even
then-
with council and the village manager.
So we don't need to discuss that
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. The next comment is on budgetary compliance. I just heard a little bit ago about Michael, taking a look at the budget. It's important. It's a, again, this is material non-compliance because you had 4 funds here that had some major budget overages. Now, that doesn't mean that the village lost any money or anything. It just means that they didn't comply with the statutory budgetary requirements. That's in statute that you have to follow. Did not make progress over the previous year. Budget is important because it's the legal level of authority that the village has to spend in a particular area. So exceeding the budget means that the village exceeded its authority. Next comment on page number 80 has to do with the late audit report. That was repeated, so that was 2 years in a row that this has been late, the audit report. And just a couple more comments here. We've got procurement code violation. It's sort of a minor violation. 1 out of 4 did not have sufficient number of quotes. And can't say why that happened, but I think it may have been procurement that originated a few years ago that did not get spent timely, and the spending happened in the current year. Probably should have gone back and looked at procurement when that process went through. So that area was an area of improvement on procurement over the previous year from our sample selections. And then comment number 9 has to do with controls over cash receipts. This is a pretty minor comment, but I think still a valid comment in the review of the cash receiving process. And actually, I think, the prior finance director coming from the private sector tried to streamline things a little bit too much for a government. So I think everybody has to sort of take away that when you're a government, you have a higher responsibility to have a stronger internal control structure in place because you're using taxpayer money. So I think everybody, has to always realize that government sometimes moves a little slow. You get frustrated as constituents sometimes, but there's a reason for that. And that's to ensure that, money is spent properly and appropriately, and that you can prove that it has. And then the last comment, this is again sort of a minor comment, has to do with general computer controls and the user access privileges. And 3 people in the village had unrestricted access to be able to do all things, and probably didn't need that. Not everybody needed that much access. So that's just an area to always look out at, is not for people not to have too much access. So if they're doing accounts payable and that's their job, they should really only have access to sort of that area instead of the whole, general ledger system where they can post entries and do other things. They can make mistakes because they don't know the area or something other than that. So those cover the comments. This covers what we're required to discuss at an open meeting. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No, I think you covered it quite well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and good luck with it. It's been a pleasure, working with the village over these years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be careful on your way home.
I'll try not to get in here, right?
Oh, yeah, or are you going back to your house?
I think I'm gonna go south.
Oh, okay.
Is that the quickest way to put Albuquerque to natural construction?
It depends.
It's about the same.
Yeah.
The same construction.
Thank you.
And it is, by the way, good reading. It's on the state auditor's website.
Yeah.
Good night.
787 pages.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Next, we have a discussion approval of appointment. Oh, wait. What?
Need to vote to accept.
Oh,
Mayor Pro Tem Billingsley.
Aye.
Councilor Curry.
Aye.
Councilor Howe.
Aye.
Councilor Humbert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
it is now accepted. Now, we're going to go to discussion approval of the appointment of Dr. Jennifer Fitch and Chris Reed to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is there a motion, please?
I make a motion for discussion approval of appointment of Dr. Jennifer Fitch and Chris Reed to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
A second.
Second.
And that's just, I don't think we have a staff recommendation because it's just an appointment and an approval.
That's the same as what you did.
Yeah,
last time,
both
Jackie.
parties have accepted to sit on planning and zoning. I don't think Chris is here. He was at the last one, but Dr. Jen's here. If you have any questions, but would like to have them appointed to planning and zoning for a 3-year term. I'll call for a vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Billingsley.
Aye.
Councilor Curry.
Aye.
Councilor Howe.
Aye.
Councilor Humbert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Congratulations. Next, we have discussion approval of grant agreement for capital appropriations SAP 22-G4042-STBR between New Mexico Environmental Department, NMED, and the Village of Angel Fire. Is there a motion?
Make a motion for discussion approval of a grant agreement for capital appropriation SAP 22G4042 STBR between NMED and the Village of Angel Fire.
Second.
Thank you. And we turn the floor over to Julie Polk.
Madam Mayor, Council, Manager Madrid, and Clerk Fox. Before you, you have the grant agreement for this capital appropriation. That's the one I mentioned earlier. It'll go for tanks 2 and 4. Those funds can be added to the previous appropriation. And I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions? No, this was a thick one, 20-some odd pages. Okay.
The whole grant agreement is for
Okay. Thank you. We'll call for a vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Billingsley.
Aye.
Councilor Curry.
Aye.
Councilor Howe.
Aye.
Councilor Humbert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next is discussion approval of resolution 2023-45, a resolution authorizing the assignment of authorized officers and agents for the grant agreement SAP 22-G4042-STBR between New Mexico Environmental Department, NMED, and the Village of Angel Fire. Is there a motion, or is there a motion?
Make a motion for discussion approval of resolution 2023-45, a resolution authorizing the assignment of authorized officers and agents for grant agreement SAP 22-G4042-STBR between New Mexico Environmental Department, NMED, and the Village of Angel Fire.
Thank you. We turn the floor back over to Julie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. So that grant agreement you just approved, they want signature authorities for that grant agreement. So on that signature authority, officers are the mayor, the manager, and myself as entering the project in the capital projects monitoring system, the software for the state.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem Billingsley.
Aye.
Councilor Curry.
Aye.
Councilor Howe.
Aye.
Councilor Humbert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next, we have a discussion approval of a request to enter into an MOU with North Central New Mexico Economic Development District, the NCNMEDD, and the Village of Angel Fire for services of a fiscal agent.
Make a motion for discussion and approval of a request to enter into an MOU with North Central New Mexico Economic Development District, NCNMED, and the Village of Angel Fire for the services of fiscal agent.
Second.
Thank you. And turn the floor back over to Julie.
Thank you, ma'am. So the capital appropriation, the environment department is gonna require a fiscal agent to act as overseer for the fund expenditures. Our COG as our fiscal agent is assigned by that department. So I ask for your approval to approve the COG to be our fiscal agent through the MOU.
Thank you. Call for a vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Billingsley.
Aye.
Counselor Curry.
Aye.
Counselor Howe.
Aye.
Counselor Humbert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next is a discussion approval of resolution 2023-46, a resolution for the reimbursement of actual expenses related to a wildland firefighting and/or training. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to discussion approval of resolution 2023-46, a resolution for reimbursement of actual expenses related to a wildland firefighting and/or training.
Second.
And we'll turn the floor over to Chief Bobick.
My recommendation is that we reimburse Captain Romo for his actual expenses on deployment. He's having issues with his village credit card being accepted everywhere he went. And so he was gone for 14 days, but only ended up needing reimbursement for $96.15.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Mayor Pro Tem Billingsley.
Aye.
Counselor Curry.
Aye.
Counselor Howe.
Aye.
Counselor Humbert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have discussion approval of resolution 2023-47, a resolution for the dedication of lodgers tax revenues and expenditures. Is there a motion?
Make a motion for discussion and approval of resolution 2023-47, the resolution for the dedication of lodgers tax revenue and expenditures.
Second.
And we turn the floor over to Tammy.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, Manager Madrid, and Clerk Boggs. Tonight, we want the approval, or we're asking for the approval of Resolution 2023-47, resolution for dedication of lodgers tax revenues and expenditures. We have 4 of them. Music from Angel Fire for $7,500. Art Up Northern New Mexico Angel Fire Studio Tour for $10,000. Veterans Healing and Wellness Center Winter Fest for $10,000. And Angel Fire Chamber of Commerce Mimosas on Main for $7,000. I stand for any questions.
Question.
Yes.
This is great, but that budget shows over $1 million. Well, I mean, where are we gonna spend it?
This is for the events.
I know, but this is, what is this, is $40,000? I mean, we gotta be creative, right?
Come to
We're working on it.
come to the lodgers tax
Okay.
advisory.
Okay, because it's, I mean, we gotta start spending some cash.
Yeah.
I hate to give it away.
This is only for the events.
I get it, I'm just
Put,
asking the 30,000 for the
have
question.
people come in to do events. We need people to come in and do events. We got money to give them.
We could build an amphitheater.
I'm just, I think we should
Is
be
there any
creative.
questions?
Yes, I agree, and our next meeting is, I believe, November 9th.
Okay.
No more questions? Would you call for a vote?
Mayor, please, may
Oh,
I?
yes, sir. I didn't see.
May I recuse myself on this because of the Veterans Wellness?
Oh, yes, sir. Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Billingsley.
Aye.
Counselor Curry.
Aye.
Counselor Humbert.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And if there's no more discussion, I have been told by our clerk that we need to make a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? And this meeting is adjourned.